So I want to talk about, the future of value creation. How do we think about innovation? And what particular perspective can we sort of have on it that can be applied to these conversations? I can say that the themes that I'm going to talk about have really been prevalent throughout all of the discussions this morning. So that's what I want to do. Before I do that, though, I thought maybe I should take 75 seconds to tell you a little bit about myself. Where I come from, why I'm interested in this topic. Does that make sense to you, the journey to get to this point? Sure. Yes, the human element for the engineers. The answer to the question where I come from is my parents. So you need to know something about my parents. My mother is black and Cherokee. My dad is Swedish, and they met in Germany, obviously.
You are a minority.
That's right. I grew up in Sweden. This is what makes me into this particular demographic. And when I grew up there, Sweden consisted essentially of two groups of people. One group was blonde, blue-eyed, and quite reserved. The other group was me, basically. Obviously, I'm kidding. That was me and my sister, actually. Here's my favorite hobby. Here's my favorite movie. Here's my favorite book. I went to college at Brown University. I studied environmental science for the following reasons. And when I did that, I saw something quite fascinating. There are a lot of different scientific researchers at this campus, but I never really felt that they were able to pull together the purpose of their research. And I wanted them to do that, so I created a science magazine with that intent. And it's still around today, actually. And this, in turn, inspired me to start a healthcare company based on my aunt's research at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. I had a lot of fun doing that. Then I went to business school at Harvard, started a software company, which did great until it didn't. And then I got an idea for a book. And that idea was based on intersections. This is this theme that Nick was talking about. I had seen that in my life. Whenever I was able to combine concepts from the different disciplines I've been exposed to, from the different industries or cultures I've been exposed to, I had a better chance of breaking new ground. And so I wondered, is that sort of a generalized truth for innovation? I decided to research that. It took me far longer than I ever imagined. I was literally down to when I was $2.45. When things started turning around, the book came out, people liked it. It's been translated in 18 languages, and I get to talk to people like you all over the world, which I greatly enjoy, and to work with people all over the world. In fact, this led me to start a hedge fund and then a consulting firm. Last year, a book called The Click Moment that I wrote came out. In all this, I got married. Now I have a daughter. Actually, I have two. Now I'm here with you, which basically is my story up until this particular point in time. All right, thank you. So that's my brief introduction. Here's the thing. Let me just put this out to what I can sometimes get as a provocative reaction to the concept around innovation. And that is this. It's provocative particularly among people that will take a very rational approach to life. And it is this. We rely on logic in trying to reach success. Actually, this statement is not provocative. In fact, there's nothing but this statement that is provocative. We rely on logic in trying to reach success. And what I'm claiming is that actually that can be very flawed. And the reason for that is because if logic is sort of your competitive advantage to find value, then you're sort of saying that you're assuming that nobody else has access to logic. But people do all over the world. They can actually truly rationalize all kinds of things. So this logic things could put us in a tough spot. And I'll give you a quick example this is an example from Young Mi Moon, who's a professor at the Harvard Business School, but it perfectly illustrates this point. So imagine actually that you're making cars. Some of you do not have to imagine that, okay? And let's pick a car. Let's just pick a brand completely at random. Let's say it's Volvo, all right? So, well, it used to be Swedish, then US, and now it's Chinese. But, and let's say that you evaluate a car along 5 dimensions: reliability, size, safety, design, and miles per gallon. And let's say you have a direct competitor. It's called Audi. And along 3 of these dimensions, you're more or less the same, but along 2 of them, there are major differences. You all, as Volvo, kick ass in terms of safety, but not so much in terms of design. And for Audi, it's the reverse. If I asked you, what would the logical move be? Where should you place your emphasis? What do you need to improve? You would say, well, of course, design. Because if I can improve design, I will crush Audi. Except Audi's thinking the same way, so they improve safety. And now something interesting starts to happen as these cars make it out. This is the logical outcome of using logic in trying to differentiate yourself. You end up in the same place as others because it's the logical place. Which raises the point and the question at what exactly is a brilliant strategy then? I think this is a very interesting question. Actually, there's lots of people that go around and providing answers to this question. They have all kinds of notions to it. And so I want to tell a story that I think sort of questions even the purpose of coming up with a brilliant strategy. It's a story around Microsoft. This is obviously a company we're all very familiar with. They used to be the largest company in the world for quite a run. But they weren't always. And in fact, I'm going to make the claim now, this could be discussed, but roughly this is accurate, that the reason why Microsoft became the largest company in the world came down to a particular operating system, Windows, particularly actually Windows 3.0. Up until Windows 3.0, Microsoft was a very successful software company, but nowhere near sort of the tech behemoths like IBM. And after Windows 3.0, that changed. And in fact, they were able to create this amazing business model. Like they would have Windows and they have other software on top of it, like Word and PowerPoint and Excel, and they just upgrade all of it, like NT, 95, 98, Millennia, Vista. That sucked, but you know, they would be doing all this, and you have to buy all of it over and over again. Amazing. Which is why this success, all harkening down to Windows, makes it kind of interesting when you realize that in the late 80s, Microsoft had exactly 3 people working on Windows. Out of the 8,000 employees that they had, 3. Why? Because they're going to shut Windows down. See, Windows had a fatal memory flaw. No matter how much memory your computer had, Windows could only access sort of a scant sliver of it. So Ballmer and Gates realized that this is not the future. We're going to strategize to figure out what it is. And actually went to IBM. Obviously, you're probably super intimately familiar with this. And created OS2. Remember OS2? It's going to be this amazing operating system. And they took all the smart people off from the Windows group and put them to work with OS2. One of the guys left was David Weiss. And he was trying to solve this particular problem. And one night he goes to a party. And he runs into an old friend of his, Murray Sargent. And Murray Sargent has just sold the debugging system to Microsoft. And he's on his way to Germany, but he stops by the Redmond campus just to kind of check out to see how things are going. And he's there for a week. And they run into each other. And Murray Sargent decides to have some fun with David. He says, "Hey, David." And David says, "Yeah." Murray says, "Windows sucks." David says, "Yeah. Well, you should use my debugging system to fix it." I'm paraphrasing. But that was more or less how the dialogue went. And David goes, "You're right. Let's go and do it now." And they did. It was 7 p.m., June 3rd. I actually called Murray to figure this out. And it worked. They solved the bugs. And then David worked in secret for about 3 months throughout sort of the entire summer. And finally, Ballmer Gates figures out what's going on. Gates switches everything around in that one meeting. It leads to conflict and lawsuits between IBM and Microsoft. But when you say that I want to follow Microsoft's strategy for world domination, what do you actually mean? Purposefully take the most successful operating system in history and decide to shut it down? I mean, is that the plan? It came down to a very serendipitous meeting at a party on the Microsoft campus. Actually, this is how I make the argument that innovation happens over and over again. We don't think it does because we use a different model to understand success. One of them is this one. It says that expertise is really the key to success. A logical understanding of a particular discipline will do it. And we have evidence of this all around us. Serena Williams is a perfect example. She's actually an example of this 10,000-hour rule that's been popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers. And it says the following. It says that if you want to become the best in the world at something, then you should deliberately practice for 10,000 hours or more at that thing. And the reason this rule works is because 10,000 hours is a lot of hours. Yeah, see, way ahead of everybody else. And she's a perfect example of this. Do you realize that Serena can't remember having lived a single day of her life without having played tennis? It's incredible. And she is absolutely exceptional. But then there's these exceptions. How many hours of practice do you think Reed Hastings had in video rentals before he started Netflix? He rented some movies and he didn't like it, so he started Netflix. Or Richard Branson, he starts Virgin Music, Virgin Records, and then he does the next logical thing, which is Virgin Airlines. How many hours of practice did he have running an airline? He actually started with a lawyer, where it was, lawyers can do that. There's something weird about this rule. It works for Serena Williams, but when it comes to the world of business, it seems to have some flaws. It comes down to this. For Serena Williams, the rules of the game never change. These are the measurements of a tennis court, and they stay this way for like 100 years. And if the rules change, they change very slowly. So it used to be that if you wanted to serve a ball in tennis, you need to actually keep 1 foot on the ground, right? Well, they changed that rule about 50 years ago, so you could jump and serve. Wow. How can anybody keep up in this fast-moving world of tennis? That's what it means to have innovated in the world of tennis. She can spend 10,000 hours doing exactly this because she knows that she will be using a tennis racket yesterday, today, next year, 10 years from now. How does it work for the rest of us? So Nokia was the Serena Williams of the mobile phone world. Okay? Had 3 times, I think there were 3 times, their profits were 3 times larger than the next competitor. They were the #1 brand in Europe, #5 worldwide. I mean, just all over the charts. And they knew the rules of the mobile phone world cold. Phones were supposed to have cool colors, cool shapes, and cool ringtones. And in less time than it takes somebody to earn a law degree in this country, all those rules changed. Nobody cared about the colors, they're all black. Nobody cared about the shapes, they're all rectangular, with, without, rounded corners. And nobody cares about ringtones, it's all about apps. And the thing about this that I find fascinating is that if the rules can change, then our ability to predict, to understand, to logically figure out what the next right move is gets challenged. It's put in question. Well, you might say, perhaps, but perhaps not. What if we can understand the trends that exist around the world? Here's Stephen Elop, who he used to be the CEO of Nokia. But he says, we missed big trends. Now, this is undoubtedly true. Okay. But, wait, hold on. Let's take a look at what people actually said about the iPhone when it came out. It's a complete success today, of course. We know that it has been for years. But here's what people said. This is CNET. Apple is slated to come out with a new phone, and it will largely fail. That was wrong. Here's Bloomberg. Apple is unlikely to make much of an impact on this market. And here's Ed Colligan. He used to be the CEO before John. We've learned to struggle for a few years here, figuring out how to make a decent phone. PC guys are not just going to figure this out. They're not just going to walk in. My point here is not to make fun of these folks. My point is simply this. These were the people who understood the mobile phone world better than anybody else on the planet. If they couldn't figure out what the next logical move was supposed to be, who was supposed to do it? I mean, who else? It's just not that easy. This is a fundamental fact about innovation. The unexpected is what makes us stand apart. The reason why is because it means that we have hit upon something that sets us apart in a way that is not logically available for somebody else to necessarily achieve. We see this over and over again. There are any number of people in Silicon Valley that will slam their heads against the wall when YouTube came out. Are you kidding me? You upload a video and you view it? What? That's an idea? But the thing is that the people that invented YouTube didn't really invent YouTube. I mean, YouTube started out as a dating site. And the idea was you upload a video, then people vote, whether or not they want to date you. Now, that's an awful idea, okay? But then one night, two of the founders went to dinner. They filmed that dinner, and they had nowhere to share the video. And then the third founder was desperately trying to find a video of Janet Jackson's wardrobe malfunction. And they meet up, and they're like, wait a minute. You upload a video, find a video. Our software does that. They sold YouTube to Google 18 months later for $1.65 billion. But But of course, if they could have logically figured out that it wasn't about a dating site, they wouldn't have spent any time doing that. And we see this over and over again. I mean, you know, the notions of the idea of how the world would unfold, we try to be precise about it, but it doesn't work. There are tons of approaches to create electric cars. I mean, we talked about this when we met in Detroit. And if you look at what disruptive innovation theory will tell you, it's the exact opposite of this approach that seems to have worked. Disruptive innovation theory says, no, it shouldn't be a luxury car. It should be some scrappy, little ridiculous something that only, you know, people with no money can buy. This is like a $100,000 car. And just yesterday, they announced a $5 billion manufacturing plant here in the US. Or it's a lot of talk about cloud. We talked about it all morning. Of course, and this is an indisputable trend. The Gartner Group considers one of the big 4 trends that is just, you can't argue it. And I agree with that. But then I had this conversation with somebody at BitTorrent, an executive there, who was saying that they've been getting a ton of requests over the past 6 months because of the fact that it turns out that the cloud, well, actually, it's stored on a server. And this server is accessible by, say, the NSA and others. But BitTorrent protocol are spread out peer-to-peer on computers everywhere. It's virtually impossible for someone to access that. They've been asked by Fortune companies to help them create solutions through a BitTorrent protocol. Can this change the way we think about the cloud? I don't know. That's the point. Now, how do we take all this uncertainty and make use of it in a way? And how do we apply it to the thinking and the question of how to create value in America? Well, I think that the answer has to do with intersectional thinking, and it addresses this uncertainty at its heart. What I say when I talk about the meditative effect and when I talk about intersectional thinking is that we have the best chance of creating breakthrough ideas, those ideas that really matter, when we combine concepts from different fields, cultures, departments, silos. It's at the intersections of these different fields or cultures that or industries that we can break new ground. I'll give you an example. It was my favorite example, so I always include it. We have this architect. His name is Mick Pierce. He receives a challenge one day to build the largest building in Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe. But this building is to contain no air conditioning. This is an intriguing challenge because on occasion it gets hot in Zimbabwe. But now he manages to accomplish this by combining his field of expertise, architecture, with the field of termite ecology. And here's how it works. Termites build these mounds on the African savanna, and they need to keep an exact 87 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius everywhere in the world except for here. But the temperature on the savanna can drop to 40 degrees at night and rise to over 100 degrees during the day. So how can the termites manage to keep an exact 87 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, what they do is to build these vents around the mound, and then they redirect air breezes into these vents into a cool pool of mud. And then they circulate this air up. And by opening and closing vents constantly, they can regulate the temperature exactly. Big Pierce looked at this and said, I can use the same principle for my building. He did that. Eastgate is one of the largest buildings there, uses no air conditioning, and it uses about 90% less energy than any other building around it, with a steady temperature of about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Innovative? It's up there. Yeah, why did he think of this? I mean, this is really the question that we have to ask ourselves. Was it because he was an architect focusing exclusively on the field of architecture? No. And he wasn't a termite ecologist either. But he combined concepts from these two fields, and when he did that, he broke new ground. This is what allows us to escape this logic trap. It allows us to actually take the expertise that we have, but actually supercharge it, if you will. We are able to come up with concepts or thoughts that others couldn't necessarily immediately have realized through a rational approach. This means that if you are looking for creating value in the future, it's going to have something to do with this diversity. I'll talk about the fact that diversity drives innovation. I'll talk about diversity broadly, diversity of cultures, fields, departments, gender, disciplines. But it is at these intersections they have a better chance of coming up with something that actually truly changes the game. And so staffing for innovation, in my mind, means staffing for diversity. In fact, that was the reason why Ted connected us. He was the chief diversity officer at IBM. Now, and we see this play out. We can see this play out for teams really all over the world. Here's a screenshot from a video game called Mirror's Edge. Has anybody here played it? I'm just curious if we have any gamers here. No. You play games, but not that game. You're like, I don't like that game. Yeah. Well, the thing about this game was the guy who designed it, he really didn't like the way game design was occurring traditionally. And the way it kind of works is like this. You have animators over here, you have programmers over here, you have designers over here, and they sit in different parts of the building, and they sort of send specifications to each other via email or some other system. So I'm going to change that. So you had animators sit next to programmers, sit next to designers, sit next to animators, sit next to programmer, and said for 2 weeks he thought they were going to kill each other. But then the conversations changed. Because it used to be like this. Hey, can you do this? Hey, no. Okay, that's kind of how they were communicating. So he wanted to change this. It became more like this. Hey, can you do this? No, but I can do that. Oh, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that before. And here we're talking about I like to add. If you think about it, this goes to the heart of a theme that's been through the entire morning, which is about density, concentration, about connections. He said it was critical for the success of this game. And when it came out, it won all kinds of innovation awards, not because it had a greater innovation budget per se, but because it changed the way they worked. I call them up fairly frequently. They came up with a game called Battlefield 4, which is one of the most successful games last year. And I asked them, for those of you that don't know, it takes place on a battlefield for the 4th time. That's the plot line. Now, and I said, you still do this? And I said, do we still do it? We have pods created throughout the company where we have these cross-functional teams. So my biggest job is to try and figure out where people are going to sit. But as it turns out, the diversity is not enough. Having the diversity is not enough. Not if you can't make the connection. Somebody here this morning said, well, you could have, if you just have all the people from Shanghai over here and then all the people from, Boston over here, and they don't connect, then you're not really making use of this diversity. That's absolutely true. Beyond a doubt. There's lots of interesting ideas that we can even think of in our own minds, but if we actually are not seeking the connections out, we can't make them. I met with the CEO of Embraer, one of the largest aircraft manufacturers, Brazilian. And he was telling me about this partnership they had with BMW to try to design the Phenom plane, which is one of their private jets that they were creating, in order to create a completely new design aesthetic. This is an idea that anybody in this room can think of. But actually making it happen means that you have to make the connection and explore it. It means that we have to put ourselves in a situation where we can make these connections. You have to have the diversity, and you have to encourage the connections. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. Well, so then the question is, how do you create environments for these connections? Why is it that I've gone around and talked to people all over the world about this? I mean, why doesn't this happen naturally? And the reason for this has something to do with this type of trajectory. If you have diverse teams and homogeneous teams, and they're sort of performing side by side, the performance does not start out the same, because the homogeneous team is way outperforming the diverse team, generally speaking. They understand each other much faster. They can get to the point much more quickly. You all recognize this. In fact, I'm willing to say that anytime we say that you're an architect, and you're like, somebody tells you to spend some time with termite ecologists. You're like, are you kidding me? What's the ROI on this time that I'm spending with them? We always want to know the ROI. And we forget that, in fact, if you continue, a well-functioning diverse team should way outperform. And in fact, to the degree that they've been able to have studies on this, it's turned out this way, more or less. Which sort of brings the point that I think understanding the true value of ROI is one of the biggest challenges in actually creating value for the future. Everything we do, we sort of want this ROI measured. And somebody mentioned it also this morning. This is why these themes come back over and over again. I kind of need to have run these numbers in order to sort of take the steps that we need to take. Yeah, failure's good, but let's at least have informed failure. Yeah. But is that how the world works? Yes, if you live in Serena's world. Serena can make a very distinct connection between exactly the amount of work that she puts in with the output that she gets. But if the rules of the game keep changing, you're not sure. You know, people forget that Brin and Page, when they started Google, 9 months after they started Google, 9 months, they realized they had a choice to make, right? They could either focus on the PhD studies at Stanford, or they could focus on Google. And they chose the PhD studies at Stanford. And they went to Yahoo with Google and said, you can have it for $1 million. And Yahoo said, no, it's not worth it. ROI. And before we sort of say that Yahoo were idiots for doing that transaction, because if you say that, you actually have to also admit that the founders of Google were idiots, because they were willing to sell Google for $1 million. So neither the founders nor Yahoo had really any clue what Google was worth 9 months after Google has started. To me, this is just fascinating. And yet we still want to introduce this, let's have ROI drive our decision making. Let's be spot on about it. We have to create value. It's a challenge. Oh, I forgot about this story. Well, the truth is that this ROI piece screws us up. When we look at the successful story, so it makes companies grow, the ROI piece becomes a challenge. And when we look at the truth behind it, and John and I had a conversation about this, the truth behind the stories of success is it turns out that it was far more unexpected or serendipitous than we thought. Pfizer was a mid-sized pharmaceutical company in the mid-'80s. They were working on this heart drug, and many of you know this story, and it wasn't very good. The heart drug wasn't very good. And yet some of the subjects kept on asking for Some of the test subjects kept on asking for more of the drug. And the person's like, why? It's not very good. But can I have some more? Particularly the guys were asking for that. So when they investigated, they realized that it has this curious side effect of enabling men to rise to the occasion. Well, one reaction could have been, haha, funny, funny. Our focus is on the heart drug. Let's stay focused on that. That's where all of our investments has gone. Here's how we think about the ROI. But they didn't, of course. I mean, we know now that they shifted. They rethought what the possibilities were, and it has become one of the most successful drugs in history. The future of value creation means that we recognize this fact. The world is uncertain, and the way in an uncertain world, the way in which we can find opportunities has to come from these intersections that allows us to escape the logic trap, that allows us to escape the trap of being too rational about how we go about creating value. Finally, I'm definitely over my time. I just want to say one word about this around education. Because the truth is, we talk about education, it comes up over and over again. And it is so tied to this notion of education that it's, it almost, to some degree, it almost breaks my heart when I think about how education is evolving and how it should evolve. Everything about education is about predictability. What happens after 3rd grade? 4th grade, and I know it. It is really quite amazing. Even how we think about our skill set. We get really, truly worried. It unleashes a whole sort of a team effort when somebody is behind. If you're in 8th grade and you have a 7th grade level of math, people get really worried about that. And maybe they should be. But then all of a sudden, it doesn't matter at all. If I told you that you're 23 years old, but you have a 22-year-old level of math, this statement makes no sense. So somehow we go from it being absolutely critical to be on a predictable path to it not mattering at all. The truth is, the world moves in unexpected and serendipitous ways. I think we should move with it. Thank you very much.